crypto, Bitcoin's global impact. What comes next for Africa and for global markets? We have an expert moderator to lead this panel, and Lucy Gazmararian, who is the managing partner and founder of Token Bay Capital. She is joined by John Wu of AVA Labs. Tone Vays, legend. Simply put, legend. As well, Davinci Jeremie, the CEO of the aptly named Davinci Codes. Also, Sebastian KOBINA, who is the chairman of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. Bienvenue à tous nos panélistes.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for Africa Blockchain Week. Very exciting, lots of blockchain weeks around the world, and today we're in Africa. So plenty to discuss on this panel. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin and the impact that Bitcoin specifically is happening, what's happening in Africa when it comes to that story. I think, generally we don't hear as much about that. So very excited personally to really sort of delve into this topic. So I've got fantastic panelists with me today. John Wu, president of AVA Labs. We've got Tone Vays from he's a derivatives trader, an analyst, and an event organizer. So there's many things going on with Tone. So looking forward to hearing about that. We've got Davinci Jeremie. He is the CEO of Davinci Codes, and Dr. Sebastian KOBINA Spio-Garbrah, who is the chairman of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. So that's a fantastic lineup. I'm going to kick this off by handing over to John. John, if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of an introduction on yourself and what AVA Labs is up to.
Sure. It's nice to be here. My name is John Wu. I am president of AVA Labs. AVA Labs is the company behind the blockchain Avalanche. And Avalanche is a first layer protocol similar to Ethereum. It's Ethereum compatible. The mission of Avalanche is to digitize all the assets in terms of financial assets as well as other assets that can be digitized, roughly $700 trillion worth of assets that sit on financial services and banks. That's our mission. In the near term, we are working hard to create DeFi solutions and creating a fantastic ecosystem on the Avalanche protocol. My personal background, I was a tech investor at some funds like Tiger Management, Kingdom Capital, and I ran my own fund. I got into operating blockchain companies primarily because of the technology. First, I fell in love with Bitcoin, and then I realized this is a great way to actually streamline how financial systems would have been built if they were built today, and also provide better access to everyone around the world for financial assets.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Davinci, over to you, if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of an intro on yourself.
Well, my name is Davinci Jeremie. I'm not only the CEO of Davinci Codes, I'm also a YouTuber. I have a YouTube channel called Davinci J15. You can find me on all my social media under Davinci J15. And also head over to davincej15.com if you want to subscribe to my Telegram channel, where I give some signals and also show you how to do the little lady strategy trading, and basically it allows you to trade the altcoins into Bitcoin. So it's always a good thing, and I know Tone Vays likes that.
Altcoins to Bitcoin. We need a bit of Bitcoin to altcoins to fiat as well, I think, going on. But that's great. Thank you so much, Davinci. Tone, over to you.
Sure. My name is Tone Vays. I come from the traditional Wall Street environment, where I was for about 10 years before joining the crypto world. I don't have a company. I just focus on education. I just spent most of my life educating about crypto. I do it in several ways. I speak at many conferences as a keynote speaker and on panels just about Bitcoin and educating Bitcoin. I have a YouTube channel myself. I organize conferences and other events, all focused on education. Some of it is education on trading, but most of it I try to focus on education about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin can change and will change the world for the better.
Fantastic. Looking forward to being educated a little bit more about this. And finally, Sebastian, over to you. Please provide us with a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, thank you so much. A real pleasure to join all of you. I grew up in Ghana in West Africa, and came to the United States when I was about 18, and for college, and worked initially in finance, and then migrated into political sort of risk advisory work. So the last 20 years, I've pretty much been helping companies who are sort of investing in frontier markets, in emerging markets, understand the political risk, the regulatory risk, and all of that. So I often tell people that, interestingly enough, I'm one of those people who understands finance and I understand politics quite well. And then I'm also a lawyer by training, but I don't practice law. And I think that fundamentally, I see the whole Bitcoin, blockchain, the entire space as effectively a negative vote on the states, on government. In a certain sense, I think the younger generation is very skeptical of state capacity, and I think that's what people are not actually understanding. That younger people are beginning to say, look, do I really want social security? Do I think social security will be there a few years from now? Do I think that the government can protect my pension and all these sort of things? And I think that's the underlying theme that I think is sort of missing. I think people are thinking of the space just as an investment, as a technological investment, but I see kind of social, cultural, and political sort of undertones and historical undertones to it. So that's really my area of interest in the space.
Yeah, fantastic. I think the geopolitics of this shift that we're going through is really interesting. We'll definitely come on to that. Just quickly to introduce myself, my name is Lucy Gazmararian. I'm the founder of Token Bay Capital, which is a digital assets and blockchain fund based in Hong Kong. So without further ado, what I would like to do is sort of break up this panel into two broad themes. And the first is really just the positioning of Bitcoin. I think, we've had really interesting headlines in the news, and they're both sort of on different sides of the spectrum. On one side, Bitcoin's hitting 65K back in April, and everything's, fantastic, and, the world's going to adopt Bitcoin, and here we have a new monetary system. And then all of a sudden, China weighs in for the third time, banning Bitcoin. We have the perennial tax season, if you like, in the US, which leads to a little bit of a sell-off. And then that was all sort of really impacted even further by Elon Musk's tweets, talking about the ESG credentials, if you like, of Bitcoin. But, it feels like those get a lot of airtime. Well, we have even more positive headlines. For example, El Salvador is making Bitcoin legal tender, which is really quite an extraordinary move. Of course, MicroStrategy is a big proponent of Bitcoin, and, he's now using a NASDAQ-listed company's balance sheet to borrow in order to buy more Bitcoin. And, we have also the Fed finally signaling interest rate hikes in 2023, which we've all been waiting for since the great financial crash of 2008, which is actually a pretty monumental move. And here we have Bitcoin sort of trading, it plummeted almost 50%. And now, it'll be interesting just to get everyone's thoughts on where we're headed with Bitcoin. And really what I want to delve into is we talk so much about the price action, but I think it would be really interesting to actually talk about, let's move beyond all these headlines, and what is the longer term potential for Bitcoin. So Davinci, I'll hand over to you to kick us off. What's really going on here behind all these sort of very varied headlines, some positive, some negative?
Well, a lot of the headlines, right, people think that they're just moving the market. I mean, I don't think so. The market had already priced in the movements well ahead of advance, right? You can see it in the charts. I like to say, show me a chart and I'll tell you the news. Um, sometimes you hear about Elon Musk tweeting and it's like, oh, he's the one who brought down the price. I really don't think so. I think somebody told him that the price was going down, and so he wanted to use it to troll the rest of the market. And it's fun. I mean, I would have done the same thing if I was him. And as long as he can legally do it, I think more power to him, right? He's having lots of fun, and I think he should continue doing it, right? Because you know what, there is no such thing as bad press, right? So as for all the positive things that are going on in Bitcoin, yes, there's a lot of great things, right? Great news articles, and this is all fundamental analysis, so to give you a reason to buy and hold Bitcoin for the long term, because people are slowly coming in. You have billionaires realizing, okay, this is a new asset class that's not going away, and it's like, duh, it's like somebody invented a spaceship, right, with faster than light speed, and you're wondering, man, I wonder if it really is going to work. I don't know. I'm not going to buy into that stock. I mean, it's ridiculous. Somebody just invented a new monetary system, right? And yeah, you're wondering, yeah, is it going to work? You know what? You got to buy. You got to take the risk. You have to buy and see what happens, right? You don't have to go in with all in, right? Of course, but you have to be exposed to this asset class because it is definitely the future. It can't be uninvented.
Well, that's great opinions there. Thank you for that, Davinci. Tone, what are your thoughts on everything that's been going on recently?
Sure. So Bitcoin always goes through these cycles of ups and downs. The news does affect it. I mean, between the China news and Elon's tweets and the market just getting a little too hot, going all the way up to 65,000. It's time for a little correction, and that's fine. The most important thing is that Bitcoin remains stable as the technology. Bitcoin transactions always go through. Bitcoin system doesn't go down. YouTube goes down, but Bitcoin doesn't. Every 10 minutes, there's another block. Transactions are being processed. And Bitcoin code, while it gets updated slowly, and that's a feature, not a bug, it gets updated slowly because Bitcoin is too important. So as long as everything remains stable with Bitcoin tech, I remain confident in Bitcoin. I'm more confident in Bitcoin today than I was back in 2013, 14 when I first started getting involved. And that's the important part. El Salvador is just the beginning, but we will see the backlash from the traditional financial system onto El Salvador, and we will see how they manage that and which countries are willing to follow suit. So at the end of the day, pretty much all news is long-term good for Bitcoin as long as the Bitcoin underlying protocol remains stable and more people continue to realize Bitcoin's value. Like, what does Bitcoin bring that nothing before Bitcoin brought before? And to me, it's basically three things. One is the unconfiscatability feature. Bitcoin is the first thing of value that a human can own that is unconfiscatable if they properly protect it in their head. It is uncensorable value transfer. You can send something to anyone in the world of value that no one can stop that transaction. And finally, it puts an end to the at-will money printing by the global central banks. And these three things just didn't exist before Bitcoin, though one of them existed back when we were on the gold standard, but no one's alive to actually remember that.
I think I am, but maybe not. John, over to you. Has Bitcoin gone mainstream? You know, do we see it as an institutional asset class now? You know, have we broken through, or do you think we sort of tentatively broke through and now we've retraced our steps?
Well, if you look at assets under custody at Coinbase as a proxy, I think more than 50% of their assets, Bitcoin particularly, they're custodying it for institutions or Wall Street type players. So if you look at that as an indication, there's no doubt that mainstream or Wall Street is here as investors. At least they're here. Not sure if that's the perfect reflection of passion and engagement in the thing, but from a pure numbers perspective, the answer is yes. Wall Street is here. They are getting involved. On a greater picture, to answer that question as well as the previous one, I think if you look at Bitcoin, it's probably the best digital commodity or possibly the best store of value ever invented. Maybe it doesn't have the history of gold, and it'll probably get there at some point, but for now, it's the newest one and it's one of the best. Let's just leave it at that. And when you analyze any commodity, it's always about supply and demand. On the supply side, we know the halving and what happens in terms of the finite cap supply of Bitcoin. But on the demand side, which is what you're referring to, yes, there are new investors every day, and Wall Street is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the pie. But the underlying reason for, no matter whether it's a retail person in the US, a retail person in Africa or Latin America or Turkey, or an institution in hedge fund or private equity firm in the US, there are two main reasons ultimately that drive the demand of this commodity. First is underlying characteristic of trust, and the second is accessibility. So in terms of trust, I think this year, especially the Wall Street crowd, have lost a lot of faith that the government can manage the money supply well enough so that we don't enter ourselves into a possible inflationary type environment where the dollar doesn't have as good a store of value. We've seen that in many emerging and frontier countries, in Africa, obviously Zimbabwe, in Latin America, you can name plenty. So from a local person's perspective, if they don't trust their local government, and I think Sebastian talked about that, this is a great alternative to keep their store of value. And we can talk about accessibility later, because especially in frontier and in emerging markets, there's a lot of unbanked. And the fact that, especially in Africa, there's like almost 1 billion people with mobile handsets, this could be the best tool for accessibility.
Yeah, no, I think really, really important comment. Sebastian, over to you for maybe the geopolitical context of this new store of value that we have.
I tend to agree with John. I think from a sort of a financial historical perspective, the fact that actually Bitcoin is sort of going through these lows and highs is a sign that a market is beginning to actually form around this asset class. It will be worse if it was just all-time high. It means that there's really no market for it. So people have to hold on to their seat pants. I would just sort of take us back in a weird way to 1439, okay, when Gutenberg invented the printing press. And if you think about it, every monk, every priest, every cardinal, every pope, anybody who basically had exclusive access to the knowledge that was at the time in these books, in libraries and universities around the world, basically thought this guy was Satan. They felt that, why is he going to tell the whole world everything that we are sitting in a monastery reading in, some ancient text, okay? And yet within 30 years of the Gutenberg press, basically Christopher Columbus and all his friends basically set sail for what we call in history the New World, and the world changed. So I think that one of the things that people who are true believers in blockchain technology and Bitcoin and every other crypto, which I said is the basis, really a kind of a libertarian belief in the sanctity of the human being, the free enterprise, etc., is that we have to have a kind of a long-term view, because I don't think when Gutenberg invented the press, he really thought that would lead to the French Revolution, that would lead to the American Revolution, that would lead to the discovery of America, that would lead to so many other things that occurred, right? And yet from that one act where you basically detached knowledge from this exclusive club of monks and priests, you were able to catalyze a whole chain reaction of events that led to what we now call the modern world. And in a certain sense, in my judgment, that is actually what is happening. There is something happening which is much bigger than governments, and that's why the governments are trying their very best to control it, to fight it, but it's not going to work. Much like the governments try to ban books. I mean, if you go back in Europe just a few hundred years ago, they used to have bonfires. They used to bring all the books of Davinci or the books of what's his name? Not Davinci, the guy who basically said that the world revolved around the sun and not the other way around. Galileo, exactly. Galileo Galilei, exactly. You know, so I mean, again, all these guys, as soon as they came up with something that challenged the entire structure of thinking at the time, they became enemies. And but so that's how I look at it. I'm really fascinated in the whole you know, the whole enterprise for its historical purposes, because I really think that, like John has said, if blockchain technology takes off, some guy who is in the middle of Chad or Mauritania or Mongolia, or some woman who is in a single mother in the middle of, you know, Bhutan, basically can access global capital system in a way that bypasses the big banks, the big regulators, etc., etc. And if you think about it, that is really scary to all the guys who have spent all their life studying at Harvard or Oxford, and basically they run the big banks, they run the big governments. So I think that the governments that eventually the government will find a way of issuing their own crypto, and there'll be a bunch of different cryptos, and eventually some would emerge and some would, you know, be absorbed into others. But I do think that for me, I think this is a train that has left the station. It would have stops. It would roll over. The chains would break. You would have to change the engine. But this train is not going back, because fundamentally 7 billion plus people are generally, and again, you know, in my line of work, to just end here, this my first comments. In my line of work, when I travel to different countries, I talk to taxi drivers, I talk to people in the markets. I just don't stay at the Ritz-Carlton of whatever country I go to and just sort of have fun. I really go into the ghettos, into different difficult areas. And in those places, people are yearning for economic freedom. They are yearning for liberation, economic liberation in a certain sense. And they often don't see their governments responding to it. So I really think that the ups and downs of Bitcoin in a certain sense and all the cryptos is really just the market finding its own balance. I see the governments really coming after the you know, the industry in a very big way, but I don't think it would succeed long term. No.
Wow, you know, fantastic. And I love the analogy with 15th century Europe. You know, you democratize knowledge by freeing the written words, and now we're having the democratization of value. So you know, really exciting stuff. I think that's just been great to sort of set the scene from a macro perspective. I'd now really love to sort of really zone in on what the Bitcoin story is in Africa specifically. Davinci, maybe you can help us, you know, sort of set the scene and what's really important that's happening in Africa, and you know, what problems can it solve? You know, what are the issues that Africa is, or you know, I know every nation in Africa, in the African continent, is very different and has very distinct economy and, you know, different use cases. But what do you think, what's been a sign of success of Bitcoin, in particular African countries?
Well, I believe that it is mostly remittance that Bitcoin will shine for now, because there is a whole underlying layer under Bitcoin that can't be used until it becomes what's called a unit of account, and basically where you actually pay your suppliers and pay your employees directly a fixed salary in Bitcoin, and that's a long way off. Now, once we get to there, then there's a lot more features and benefits for Bitcoin for African countries, but that's so far away that we can't really can't really, we can speculate on what the features are and as best we can, but what they will use, right? Because in the end, people will look at the technology, see the features and go, well, I'm not going to use it that way, the way it was intended. I'm going to use it another way that that we can't really even imagine, right? So we have to wait and see for that, but definitely remittance and being able to actually work remotely and get paid without going through the banking system is huge. A lot of my employees came from Venezuela because I was able to pay them in the Bitcoin, and they became rich over a very short amount of time, right? So it makes money go into the country and increase the wealth there. Now, naturally, most people end up leaving once they do receive a certain end up at a certain economic level, and that's unfortunate because that withdraws their mental, does a brain drain for that country, and that's really important for that country, basically to have people that not only have great wealth, but also great intelligence, so that they can also lift up the rest of the people around them. And so hopefully, we'll see more people staying in their home countries instead of departing from it. And that would be a great advantage for African nations if that can occur. But unfortunately, with the governments not, providing any kind of safety and security and a rule of law that allows them to continue their growth, it's really difficult for most individuals in impoverished countries to continue to see growth in their hometown.
Yeah. Turn over to you. What do you think El Salvador, accepting or passing a bill to allow Bitcoin to be legal tender? Do you see that happening? Africa following suit, different African countries, would that be helpful?
Well, it's hard to say if they're going to follow suit, but they certainly should. My time in Africa keeps getting interrupted by COVID. I was there. I actually flew out to Africa in March of 2020, but all my time was spent in South Africa. And instead of spending like 3 months going all around Africa, I had to come back to the States. I was also in Zanzibar and Tanzania earlier this year, but after the death of the president, their COVID situation got bad. And it got by bad, I mean, they forced people to start wearing masks and stuff, so I left. And I ended up in Dubai, even though they have a mask mandate as well. Dubai is experiencing the brain drain that Davinci mentioned. I want to focus on that a little bit more. That's probably the most important part. I was never big on remittance. I never felt remittance was so popular back in 2014 and 15 as a use case for Bitcoin, and I never saw it that way. I see Bitcoin as a way to eliminate the word remittance altogether, because also, as Davinci mentioned, people can work from anywhere in the world and get paid in Bitcoin, and you have an ability to learn anything for free now on the internet between YouTube and other resources. So any job that doesn't require physical labor could be done from anywhere in the world, and you can always request that payment in Bitcoin, and you should be looking for that job from someone that understands Bitcoin to pay you in Bitcoin. But the brain drain is the most important, because the reason why Dubai is being so successful right now is because they have a much bigger openness to money. The West has gotten, and the Far East as well, with China and some of the other Asian countries, they've gotten basically, they keep doubling down and doubling down on money laundering laws and know your customer laws. And Dubai is still fairly open. And unlike the West, which is now demonizing people that are wealthy and creating this class warfare, just like they're creating racial warfare in places like Dubai, there isn't much of class warfare. Like, they are happy that people are making money, forming businesses, and earning wealth. And the best way to do that looking into the future is by accepting Bitcoin. A lot of these countries are so scared that if they allow Bitcoin to be acceptable, like, you don't need to announce that Bitcoin is legal tender. Just say that we allow free markets, and you can use Bitcoin without any concern of being a criminal for using Bitcoin. And that's all that needs to be done. You don't need a law that says it's legal tender. Just say that, yeah, this is perfectly fine. Your money and your wealth is your property. Like basically your body is your property, and you're not going to be, criminally charged for anything you do with your money. Unless you're doing something actually like illegal with the money, but the money itself is not the illegal part, which is the problem in the West. And just accepting of that will bring a lot of smart people to your nation. They will start businesses, they will hire people, and that's what drives an economic boom, is this freedom to start your own business and to earn money. And the sooner African countries recognize that, or let's not even focus on Africa, any country can recognize this. I don't want to be specific to one region. The sooner that region will start attracting the brightest and the smartest people to go there and create economic activity.
John, would you agree with Tone on all those points?
One thing that really resonates with what Tone just said was, I'll paraphrase. I think blockchain and Bitcoin represents freedom. It is, again, about, self-sovereign identity and distributed governance, having your own choice, having your own digital identity owned by yourself. I think in the US, it's not just mistrust of the potential of mismanagement of the money system by the government, but it's also of large tech and big tech. As a practitioner and investor, I definitely benefited from Web 2.0, investing in a lot of these, at that time, smaller companies providing great efficiencies. And now I think because some of these companies are so big, they're not just focused on providing efficiencies and making individuals' lives better. They're actually manipulating the information in a way that pushes me to do things that perhaps I would not have done. So, I mean, maybe the reason why Dubai is such a nice place is because they don't have social media. Maybe they banned social media and there's no rage going on over there. I don't know. But for sure, I think the fact that Bitcoin is represents freedom in many ways helps a lot of countries really think about how to or how not to embrace the asset. And the fact that China has come out this week and banning the miners, I think it's, Bitcoin is kind of antithetical to what the Chinese government wants. They want control. And if Bitcoin does grow, control and freedom is no longer in the hands of the Chinese government.
I think we're going back to geopolitics again, Sebastian. What are your thoughts? I mean, can Bitcoin unify the world, unify African continent specifically? Any insight onto use cases of decentralized currency, if you like, in Africa?
I think it's definitely, Bitcoin is unifying people. Is it unifying governments? Probably not. But it's unifying people, and I think that ultimately, I think the governments represent the people. So there's a lag. There's what's in finance we call an intertemporal lag between the time when something happens and the time when you see the effect. So I think that in a certain sense, the people on blockchain technology, etc., and Bitcoin ahead of most of the governments, because the governments by their very nature like to do things as they used to be. But I have no doubt that much like that, I went all the way back to 1439. I think that much in the same way that, when printing technology emerged, initially the churches were opposed to it, the monks didn't like it, but ultimately, the church didn't disappear. Neither did printing disappear, neither did the monasteries disappear. Eventually, they will all adjust, but they will adjust in a different way. But what I was trying to get at is that when these things emerge, I don't think initially they realized that no, this would lead to the Reformation. The Reformation would lead to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment would lead to the, the French and American revolutions, which will lead to the rise of the United States as a major dominant power in the Atlantic Basin. I mean, these are things that took 200 years, and eventually even colonialism, slave trade, all of it came from the same event. I mean, if you didn't have maps, if you didn't have books, how would Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus and everybody else sail from Portugal towards Africa and the New World? How we have done it. So my point is that I am really interested in the third, fourth, fifth derivative of this. And I think that the fact that you have on a particular matter, the government of China, the government of the United States, and most European governments and a number of governments around the world all singing the same tune tells you that this is something that is beyond one region. This is something that has huge historical implications. So I think that if one is investing in this sector with a kind of a 6-month time frame or 1-year time frame, they probably would lose the big move. I think that this is really a half a generation kind of investment. It's something, it's almost like, think of microchips in 1953 or 1955. I mean, before think of people entered the computing field in Silicon Valley maybe 1965 or 1972. I mean, this is 10, 12 years before computers even emerged, to the average person. I came to the United States in for university in 1997, and I remember working on an MS-DOS sort of black box kind of computer. And at the time, the internet really didn't exist as we know it. And I remember Lycos and Alta Vista and all these AOL.com and all these sort of early age internet companies. So my view is that I think if you take a very short-term view of this market, you would break your heart and kill yourself and die of a heart attack. But I think that if you take a kind of a more longer-term view, you would realize that this is a major event in human history, where for the first time, a poor person who sells cocoa or who sells an art painting in the middle of some country nobody has heard of can actually list this as an NFT and sell that artifact or that unique painting or artwork or whatever to Davinci or to me or to John Woo or to you. And that has never happened before. I mean, we've always had 3 intermediaries, 6 intermediaries. And at the end of the day, the poverty is in a certain sense that the intermediaries take all the money and the producers actually, so the person who's producing a banana on a plantation in Guatemala doesn't get much. But the banana trader who is sitting at Credit Suisse or Goldman Sachs makes a ton of money trading bananas, right? But the guy who actually produces the banana in Guatemala gets nothing. Right? And in a certain sense, blockchain technology eliminates many of the intermediaries and makes it easier. So this actually is going to change the world. It's going to lift ultimately a lot of people from poverty.
Yeah, I love that. And I always say, for me, blockchain is the ultimate financial inclusion tool. And I think, we're slowly coming to that realization. So, we've got a few minutes left. I would love to just finish with sort of forward projections, but really sort of taking the US dollar into account, because there's no denying that we've lived in a world where the US dollar is the global reserve currency. And, now we have Bitcoin, and we also have other cryptos, and we have CBDCs. So I'd just love to go around and sort of see everyone's view. How far are we going to go with Bitcoin, and does it have the potential to become the world's reserve currency? Are we doing away with exchange rates and FX markets essentially? So Tone, I'll hand it over to you for some short and sweet comments on this.
Sure. So I've actually been a big dollar bull going into the year 2020. So in all my videos, I was always for years, I was questioning all of these hyperinflation views. How is the dollar going to go down? What other currency is going to take over? I mean, eventually it'll be Bitcoin, but I didn't see that happening anytime soon. Everything changed for me in 2020 after what I saw go down with the US election. based on what happened in the US election, I now see the world losing confidence in the US political stability, in the US political system. The reason why the US dollar has been the world reserve currency is not because US has the biggest military, and it's not because oil is traded in dollars. All of that is totally silly. The reason why the US dollar has been the world reserve currency is because the world saw the United States as the most transparent, the most rule of law, the most honest political system in the world for a large country, because little tiny countries are not going to be able to have a world reserve currency. And with the 2020 election, my view on everything has changed because I no longer trust the US election process. I no longer believe that the US is any different than most other countries. And I think over this decade, over the current decade, other countries are also going to start dumping the dollar. We're seeing it right now with El Salvador, who it does use the dollar as their actual currency, and now their dollar and Bitcoin. And other countries are also going to be looking to get away from the dollar because of this loss of confidence.
Yeah.
Also, the global loss of confidence with the economic shutdowns over COVID. And this sets up Bitcoin really nicely because the dollar's 100-year reign is statistically and historically has to come to an end. And in this digital world, I just don't see the world trusting any other country with the world reserve currency. That's why the IMF is trying to come up with this basket. But how is the basket any different? They're all fiat currencies. So I do think the world will converge to Bitcoin being this world reserve currency. If it happens next year, Bitcoin tech probably can't handle it. But if you give it another 3 to 4 years, when most people are using the Lightning Network for micropayments, it can totally be possible.
Okay, awesome. And that was a fantastic response. I now have about 30 seconds left.
Sorry.
So it's going to be a yes or no. John, what do you think? World's reserve currency for Bitcoin?
Well, first, Tone brings up some incredible things to think about. And I don't know if Bitcoin will become the world's reserve currency, but I agree with Tone 100% that it's not just the mistrust of the US government in terms of devaluing the dollar, but it's also generally the mistrust of the politicians of the US. So we are doing our best, unfortunately, to give away our most prized possession, which is, or devalue our most prized possession, which is, the dollar.
Okay, and that's it. It's got to be a yes or a no now, because it's literally, we're going to go off air. Davinci, yes or no, world's reserve currency?
Yes, it will be. Okay.
Sebastian?
No, not initially, no.
Oh, now I want to stay on longer. Okay, well, unfortunately, on tenterhooks, but
sorry, Sebastian.
And I'm very, very sad we can't delve into that. But thank you so much, everybody. That was really fascinating. The passion was incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.